who's not a member.
Yeah, there are no members of the public except for, well, Darren Shibler from CCRPC.
And I have nothing to say that's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I have a question about the May minutes. Do we keep minutes of meetings that we don't have a quorum for? I saw that you did actually put everything together and did a good job of it, but I'm not sure that
Yeah,
that approving minutes of a meeting that really, in a legal sense, didn't happen makes sense.
right. So I think I'll continue to take those notes just so that other folks that weren't there can just look at what the discussion was. But yeah, you're correct. And maybe I think you know, policy wise, if there's no quorum, it's probably not even a good idea to have a meeting if there's no quorum. Just to just to avoid confusion and so forth. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
I thought it was a good discussion. I was glad that we did it. I just I think it was more an informal discussion than a meeting, and
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Good points.
Yeah, I think you could, just to chime in, you could frame it that way, that this was not an official meeting. Here are the notes of that meeting. They're not official minutes.
Yeah. Good idea.
I didn't have anything that I saw that needed to be amended or corrected in the minutes that you took. So
Okay.
I'm happy to leave it as it was.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I would say if anybody, feel free to look at the discussion. But yeah, it's not like they're not official minutes. It's just a record of a discussion that was had by not a quorum of the committee.
So I can't see everyone. I can only see three of us. I see it. There's 7 people. That would mean that we have 5 members of the committee. Does that represent a quorum so that we can?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're good there.
Okay, then I think that we are ready to begin reviewing and discussing the draft ordinance. It's fairly lengthy and has a lot of detail in it. What do you think the best way to discuss that is going to be?
Well, I can, Darren and I can kind of take you through the main points, and I had a discussion with the town manager about he sort of reviewed this, and I really wanted feedback from him on whether this was heading in the right direction. And thankfully, he said, yeah, it looks good. He suggested that most of the red line changes that you see in here just be created into a separate policy, and rather than, and I think anyway, so Darren and I can kind of take you through this. I don't think that we necessarily need to get too much into the weeds, but what we're looking for feedback on is if you think the proposed structure of the Housing Trust Fund is sort of going in the right direction, makes sense. If you have any comments on if it should be taken in a different direction or additional considerations that should be incorporated. Does that make sense?
That does. So let's go ahead and let you and Darren start through it. And I would ask all of the rest of you, if you have questions, bring them up as you have them. Don't wait until we've gone through. So just unmute yourself and speak up. Is that reasonable? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, there, I did make, some minor changes to, the beginning of this ordinance, before getting into really substantive things. And I sort of even feel like, given that this is an established ordinance, and it will take, some effort and time to amend this ordinance and, get the select board to adopt an amended ordinance. And then wait for an appeal, wait for an appeal period to be over or whatever. I sort of think the minor changes on the first few pages are not even worth like changing the ordinance. There's, basically it adds a couple of more sources of funding, where the original ordinance has just states any other revenue specifically dedicated to the housing trust by written agreement or vote of the select board. So I'm not even sure that these changes are necessary. And then, the changes.
So the red is additions in this case?
Yeah, the red is additions and there's some strikeouts. So under Article 5, it's mostly really semantics that this is changing, and I don't really think it's even worth amending the ordinance. I'll get into the substantive changes and recommend that they be drafted into a separate policy that's sort of an addendum to this ordinance. And the reason for putting the program structure into policy rather than ordinance, like the reason for doing that is that policy will be much more nimble, and if we want to make changes to it, they'll be easier to make. The select board could just approve those changes and it wouldn't have to go through a public hearing process or anything like that. So that's what I'm going to recommend. And I see that Mickey Myatt has just joined us. Mickey is a member of the Planning Commission, and he's interested in kind of knowing more about the Housing Committee and just sitting. And so he wanted to attend the meeting tonight and just sit in and listen. So hi, Mickey.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to the meeting. I just knocked off from the office, so I'm staying inside my car, but I just want to listen and try to understand what is happening here. I'm just going to be keep quiet most of the time, so please don't think otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Mickey, and feel free, if you do have questions, feel free to chime in and ask. Okay. So yeah, so again, this one change here: develop and submit for approval to the select board an annual work plan. And then some details that states the proposed amount of funding to be dispersed during the next fiscal year, and the specific programs to which funding is allocated. And so again, I think there's some details in there that we need to still work out as far as timing and structure, and that could also sort of be fleshed out in a policy rather than this ordinance.
And I'll chime in here just since I made a comment on this.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the work plan idea in the ordinance I thought was interesting and helpful if there was a specific plan for using the funds in terms of like capital planning. But if based on where the program is headed, I don't know that a work plan really fits that structure. You're not going to know who's going to come in for applications for various programs at the outset. You could allocate money to certain programs at the outset to say, here's what we'd like to spend, but I wouldn't recommend that because it would limit you too much. So, and to go back to Melinda's earlier point about, if nothing else is changing in the ordinance besides the technical changes, even the ones that I did in blue, or the semantic ones, and it's really just taking that program structure and the procedures into a policy, I agree. It doesn't make sense to change the ordinance that much. It's good as it is. And if at some point it needs to get changed, you can, for other reasons, you can include these, but.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so getting down into the substantive changes. So now with the feedback that I got from the manager, this additional Article 7 procedure for use of housing trust fund and Article 8 program structure would just go into a new policy document. And so the procedure that I drafted basically says once a year, we publish a notice of fund availability. And then, awards from the fund shall further public purposes set forth herein, et cetera. And awards, yeah, and then basically the C is basically saying that the awards are loans unless specified. I think there were some cases in which they would be grants, and this is kind of a policy discussion that we should have. I think the ordinance references a preference for permanently affordable homes. And if they're not going to be permanently affordable, that the money needs to be repaid at some point. And so kind of following that guideline, I think I tried to create a structure that would, allow that basically where there's a preference for permanently affordable homes and that you incentivize permanently affordable homes by making the funding a grant rather than a loan. And then if it's going to be a loan, the period of affordability that I suggested was at least 15 years. I mean, from what I've heard from some developers, once you reach a point of 15 years, from their perspective, it might as well just be perpetually affordable, but I don't know. Not every developer may feel that way, but so that's basically what under Article 7C says. So the loans be restricted by a housing subsidy covenant of at least 15 years. And then awards shall be repaid to the fund upon sale or refinancing the home. Right, and then if the homes are perpetually affordable, funds will be granted and not required to be paid back. Yeah, and then the last point under Article 7 is just financial information will be kept confidential, except as required to comply with the law, and that some information may be aggregated, but in doing so, we'll do that without disclosing personally identifiable information.
So I had a question about the payback after 15 years or on the sale of the property. Is all that we want to recover is just the actual amount of the grant, or do we want that to be somehow keyed to inflation or interest rate or some other indicator of value, so we're retaining the same value instead of just the same amount of money?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that is a good suggestion. Certainly on inflation, interest is maybe a policy choice, because if you want to do what Champlain Housing Trust does with their shared equity program, they allow the resident, the homeowner, to retain that interest as building financial capacity, building their own wealth, because since that's one of the benefits of homeownership. So that might be something that depends on the program, and maybe up to you as the housing committee to decide if it is more in serving your goals to retain that interest and use that for other programs, or to have that interest be wealth building for the folks who are served by the program. It could go either way. Certainly it would be easier not to track it from an administrative standpoint.
Well, if we if we say that if the home is perpetually affordable, then we're not asking for a payback.
Right.
So that if they're converting it to market rate housing, then maybe it's reasonable for us to try to keep that same value somehow.
Mm,
Yeah, so I guess I'm thinking of a scenario like a shared equity home. Let's say that home is sold to someone who's not in a shared equity program, there it's not affordable, but the interest that you've lost to the grantee is the person you originally granted it to. They're retaining that interest and putting that towards their next home in theory. So I think if you are going from affordable to non-affordable, I think you've still come out ahead in terms of the goals, unless for some reason that interest ends up benefiting someone who's not in that, not in the target audience, not in the target population. I don't know how that would happen. So again, either way is fine. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could, I think you could add some details and just say like, the principal plus I don't know, plus interest at XX percentage or something like that, without making it too complicated, I guess. Or that's one example, I guess.
So all of my experiences with perpetual affordability, and I think that if we tried to retain value, people would be more likely to want to deal with some kind of perpetual affordability rather than converting to market rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see that. And you'll see, like, when we get into the discussion about the different kinds of things you could spend this money on, you'll see how, like, it's not necessary, well, you'll see how, like, it gets a little bit complicated because different ways, different programs would, this might not necessarily apply to everything. But yeah. Do you think should we just move on to talk about this, and then we can have a sort of a more general discussion about so basically in drafting this framework, I tried to take the input that I got over the last couple of meetings, your input on the kinds of things that you hope to spend the housing trust fund money on. And so what I heard was housing retention was one, grants dispersed to households at risk of losing their current housing due to financial hardship, and limited to $10,000 are not required to be paid back to the fund. So, that's a start, and, it was just sort of my first stab at that type of thing. And Darren made some comments too. Yeah, and so about what criteria are you going to use for proving financial hardship? And right, and then and also just a comment about everywhere the policy, everywhere this says low income, add very low income, and that's that's a fine suggestion too. But does anybody have any comments about that particular type of use of funds? And I know that the state has I think this was another comment that Darren made. I'm not seeing it here, but the state has like an emergency fund program that kind of works the same way, like we'll fund people who are at risk of losing their housing. And I'm not sure like how whether that is oversubscribed or what. I imagine it probably would be. Oh, right, yeah, and Darren has put a link to it. I can just
Yeah, I can only send messages to Melinda,
right.
but it's the general emergency / general assistance program. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And my comment about having criteria to determine financial hardship was maybe not as helpful as much as, presenting a problem is not a solution. But I think examples of what that could be are loss of income due to not having a job anymore, or major expense, your car got totaled and you need to pay for repairs,
mhm.
things like that. And maybe I don't know the details of the general assistance program, but they might have similar criteria that they use to determine eligibility that you might be able to pull from or reference.
Yeah, and another thing they do, I'm not sure whether the town would want to do this, but I think they release the money to whoever's owed the bills. They don't release it to the applicant. And that, I don't know. I sort of, I guess I have mixed feelings about that, but you all might, I don't know, have comments about that aspect or, but again, that's sort of getting more into the weeds, into the technical details of like how this would actually work. And we can definitely, I mean, I think right now it'd be great to get some feedback more generally on the types of programs and whether, you agree or want, different to go in a different direction or whatever. Oh yeah, and then there's another rental assistance program that Monica sent a link to, the Air app. Yeah, I can just pull that one up just for the heck of it too. Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So yeah, so there are some different programs, and we might want to, similar to other ideas for this fund, say that that the applicant has to look for funding from these other sources first, and then come to this fund as a last source of funding. I don't know. It's a thought.
One comment
Yeah,
I would have on this is that if it's an annual thing where we post, the availability of funds, someone's crisis may not happen exactly on our schedule.
right. And that was a comment I got from the town manager too, that we might want to just have this like just as an ongoing thing where we're sort of constantly like putting information out there about it, saying, hey, we have this fund, here are some of the programs, and have it out there and take applications on a rolling basis, just as a matter of course, rather than having like this set schedule. And I think that might be a good idea, especially like you said, yeah, for someone who's in crisis and they need the funding right away. Yeah. Anything else about that, the housing retention? So, and then the second program area could be housing improvements, low income owner occupants apply for a program for rehabilitation or accessibility improvements. And then it would be a reimbursement grant for actual costs incurred up to a limit of 20,000 per dwelling, required to be paid back to the fund upon sale or refinancing the home. So I'm looking to see if there's any comments. Yeah. And so I don't know if, I don't know if you have thoughts about whether this should be a grant or a loan.
Yeah, I do. If the sale is something that ends up in perpetual affordability, I don't think we should ask for it to be paid back. But if it doesn't, then I think asking for it to be paid back makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I think that would have to be like an agreement, some kind of covenant. Like I see sort of two different paths. Like there could be some sort of covenant or agreement with that is linked to the property. One path could be we agree that this will be affordable for a period of 15 years and that we will repay the funding at the sale of the home, upon sale of the home, or after yeah, I don't know. Another path would be we agree that this will be perpetually affordable, and that just gets like attached to the property as a covenant. And then in which case the funding wouldn't have to be repaid.
I think in terms of the what we're looking at now, that if we just add to the closing sentence, unless there is a covenant deed that the home becomes permanently available, perpetually available, affordable,
Yeah.
would cover it, and then the policy
Mhm.
statement would tell how it would happen.
Mhm. Um, that makes some sense to me. And then this third, number 3 was feasibility study. So that, you know, I had accessory dwelling units in mind, and kind of knowing how expensive, well, really either an accessory dwelling unit or any kind of construction of a dwelling, of any dwelling is. Realistically, how could you help with this fund? Well, it's probably going to be to those more the soft costs, the planning and feasibility studies, things like water and wastewater. What else? Planning and permitting, you know, design, maybe. Maybe not design, maybe, yeah, just feasibility study, sort of your basic, you know, as somebody is starting down that road to think about this, you know, what are the hurdles and what are the things they need to figure out before like spending a whole lot of money on design and construction, I guess. That makes sense. And the dollar amount limit that's in there now is $15,000. That might not be enough even for a feasibility study. I don't know.
And what happens if they never build, if they look at it and go, this isn't going to work?
Well, so what's written in here is if the feasibility study results in the construction, then the grant, then the money would be required to be paid back to the fund upon sale or refinancing of the home. And if the feasibility study determines construction of dwelling is not feasible, the funds will not be required to be paid back. And then Darren wrote, consider doing an applicant match, repayment of only a certain percentage of the grant. Yeah, so, you know, either at 50% match or a third match. That seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think someone might be unwilling to enter into this if they think, well, gee, I could either get $15,000 or I could lose $15,000.
Mhm.
The other nice thing about this structure is that it would match very well with the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, which is the state program that helps fund ADU construction, rehab, et cetera. They do a 20% match for that up to $50,000 grant. So that's the applicant paying 10,000 into that. And one of the eligible, types of match is doing pre-development costs. So this program could fund those pre-development costs. And if you do a local match or a applicant match of, 33 to 50%, they're doing 5 to 10 grand or something along those lines at worst to get 50,000 or more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I have some hesitation about putting in a provision to have the funding be a grant if the home is perpetually affordable for some of these things, like for 2 and 3, because then it gets a little bit complicated to kind of track all this stuff, and it might get overly cumbersome for the amount of money that you're loaning out. You know what I mean? I don't know. Whereas it'd be a little bit simpler just to say, okay, just repay us back when you sell your home. And it's not like it would be, I think, a great hardship for somebody if they're selling their home. Then they're gonna, and then it would be like basically they have to pay off the rest of their mortgage and this loan that the town gave them or whatever. I don't know. Those are just some thoughts.
In a practical sense, if they have to pay that off, that will just go into the sale price of the home. So we have automatically said that the next time the house is sold, it's going to be more expensive by not only the rate of inflation, but also by the amount of this grant. So that if we choose not to forgive it, if it's perpetually affordable, we are intentionally increasing the sale price.
Yeah, I guess I sort of see your point. I'm not sure that that's going to ordinarily, like, if we, well, yeah, I see your point.
But then my question would be too, how do you track it? And then what happens if, like, the owner dies and the children are selling the house, and it could be pretty messy.
I mean, I think we can work on kind of brainstorming and see if we can like figure out a more I don't know, a relatively simple way of doing that. I don't know. What do you think, Darren?
I was going to ask, you have inclusionary zoning in your zoning ordinance now. How are you tracking the units to which that applies?
Yeah, I mean, we're tracking that through our permitting. So like when a permit is issued, they have to indicate on the permit whether this is an affordable unit. And if for that unit, they won't be paying payment in lieu fees, et cetera. I mean, that's just sort of one aspect of it. But so we'll have a record, so that permitting will get attached to the tax parcel file, and we'll have that record, and we'll know that that's an affordable unit, and that goes into a spreadsheet. And over time, like, we'll be monitoring the sale of those. Like, we already do that for affordable units that were promised outside of, prior to our inclusionary zoning. So we're already tracking affordable units in that way. And
so you're tracking when a rental unit turns over, is it rented to someone in that income category? And same for the home ownership. Yeah. So I would say, anything that gets a grant or loan under this program just gets wrapped into that same monitoring system.
Yeah. I mean, it's right, because they'll, well, some of them, like the feasibility study, won't necessarily get permitted, but if it results in construction of a home, then it will go through our permitting system, and then we'll be able to kind of track it that way. So,
Yep.
All right.
And the only question I have on that too is if you're tracking this through permitting and through tax records, are you putting any sort of covenant or lien or anything on the
Yeah,
part? Okay, great, because that is what
Yeah.
is needed when you're talking about transfer of property, that's
yeah,
where things can get lost. So good.
yeah, yeah.
So
and
yeah,
then-
for any of these programs, except the housing retention program, which is directly to people and entities as opposed to related to the property, you're
Yeah,
going to want to put some sort of covenant on the property, and or if it's a loan, you're essentially doing a mortgage or a lien.
right, yeah. And I think like some of the finer details of how that gets done, I mean, we'll have to kind of work that out. But I think it's doable. So, and then moving down the down payment assistance program, low income first time home buyers encouraged to apply for this program with assistance with a down payment for a first time home purchase. And then applicants must first pursue funding through other existing down payment assistance programs such as VHFA or CHT. And if not able to secure enough assistance through these other programs, applicants can seek funding through this program. Grants shall be limited to $10,000 and are not required to be paid back to the fund. And again, we can do what was suggested previously and just say that if they're going to be perpetually affordable, then you won't have to pay them back into the fund. And if not, then when you sell the home or whatever, something like that. And then, Darren had made a few comments here. And then, how are we gonna know if applicants have pursued other funding? I think probably we would just, ask them to send us a letter from from a program that they've applied to or something of that nature. Any thoughts or thing? Okay. And then a couple other things. This construction and rehabilitation programs, this is just really aimed at the sort of the bigger projects with developers, including nonprofits, including real estate developers, for-profit, nonprofit, public housing agencies. And so this would be for construction or substantially rehabilitating low-income housing. And then again, this would be stacked with other funding, and practically speaking, I mean, it would have to be part of a funding stack. There's not enough money in the fund. I would say even today, there's not enough funding. There's not enough money in the fund to really be able to, stack it with other fund, like you'd have to have more money. So this might be something that happens down the road. And then finally, I had this idea, something about using funding to add homes to CHT's shared equity program, not new homes, not newly constructed homes, but existing homes. And there's some information that we need to find out, like, for example, do they want to add existing homes to their portfolio? And if so, is there a threshold of like a condition or age of the home that they would consider for their shared equity program? Maybe that they only want new homes, or they only want you know, relatively recently built homes or something like that. So that would be good to know. And then what do they need to make this happen? Like what, you know, what's CHT willing to kick in, and what would they expect the town or the homeowner to kick in to be part of their shared equity program? So we need to find more information about that.
I mean, my takeaway, I mean, there's many people on this call that know way more than me, but my takeaway from our presentations was that Champlain Housing Trust does bigger developments. So
Yeah,
it's not like you can find a one-off house and go, here, put this in your portfolio. I mean, it sounds like Habitat does one-offs.
They
But
do.
yeah,
Sorry?
But when Habitat does the one-off, where they have cooperation with, which actually, in the current model in this county, when Habitat finishes a house, they sell it to Champlain Housing Trust, and Champlain Housing Trust sells it to the family that's been working on helping build the house, but for the same cost. But Champlain Housing Trust ends up with those houses in their portfolio.
Okay, well, that's super helpful. Thank you.
yeah. I think it'd be good to just get more information about, you know, ways in which we could be, you know, kind of partnering with them. And you know, this bottom part about evaluation criteria, or this isn't, no, that's not right. General procedures. I think I gotta rethink this whole thing because you know, timing wise, there's some things about it that could work for some programs, and other programs where it wouldn't necessarily work, like the housing retention. You know, it's sort of like that's got to be a pretty fast timeline. So you know, and then this thing, like sort of the way that I wrote this assumed that there would be this cycle of funding, and in reality, I think it's probably going to work better to just have a continuous process of rolling applications. And what I sort of wonder about that is if there's high demand and, you know, there's an application every single month, and the housing committee's got to be reviewing these applications on, you know, like every time there's a new one, is that going to hinder the committee's ability to get other work done? I don't know. I mean, it's I guess you don't know how these things are going to work out until you start doing them, but it's one of the questions I have, is just how much effort is this going to be, and how much time is it going to take? So
I had the impression that 7 and 8 complete the time limits on construction belong in this kind of a document, and that all the rest of this belongs in some kind of a policy statement.
yeah, no, I know. I mean, this all is going to end up in a separate policy, for sure.
And if I could just comment on the timeline and process, I think so based on CCRPC's Brownfield Advisory Committee and other committees I've worked with, I think that as long as you set up a process and set of criteria by which projects will be evaluated, that'll help the committee make decisions efficiently and fairly and consistently. It'll help you be able to give some predictability to applicants to know that, yeah, you're going before the committee, but it's really just to make sure that everything is as, you know, give them a chance to ask questions, make sure that what's presented in the application is accurate and consistent with the program. And it's, you know, not to say a rubber stamp, but it's really just signing off on it, similar to how the select board might sign off on, you know, check warrants or other, you know, tasks that they have to go through that board process, but you've structured the program to be relatively administrative. And if you end up with so many applications a month that it's taking up too much of your meeting time, you can always set up 2 meetings a month. That would be I think that would be a commitment for you, but as proof of success of your program. So that's another way to think about it.
Yeah, true.
Or adjust your program if you're getting that many applications and you're getting them out the door. Clearly something's working well, and maybe you don't need committee review for certain things.
Does anybody have any other like general thoughts about this, about the direction this is going?
Would you stop the screen sharing so that we can see each other as you talk?
Oh,
As we
sure,
talk?
yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
No, I think it looks good. I mean, I think that's pulled in a lot of what other folks are doing and kind of the best practices as we've heard from other groups.
And Scott, I'd be interested if you have any thoughts, just because you've had more experience than I think than any of us on housing trust funds. So I don't know.
No, I like the way it's going. One thing when we had started their trust fund, there was just such a need for rental assistance that first year was really focused on providing rental assistance to keep people in their house. As the trust fund has grown, they're now giving out $1.2 million per year. And a
Wow.
lot of that funding, yeah, it's really grown. And a lot of that funding is bridge funding. It's
Yeah.
that funding that gets projects over the top. So I think that's something that we could use if we have a developer as well looking to create affordable, perpetually affordable homes is to be that next step, get things funded.
Yeah, I'd be interested in picking your brain about the rental assistance and how that, like more about the specifics of how that worked in Eugene and how that was structured.
Yeah, and I know in our case, it wasn't necessarily a last option within the city. It was, it might be a first option in that case.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at exactly what they were requiring people to provide to get the assistance. My understanding it was between $300,000 and $500,000 that went out the door during the
Wow.
pandemic. So it was a lot of money. But I think it's something here that we can do in Williston where if we have a family or an individual who's on the edge of losing their home, we can just keep them in their home and prevent the
Yeah.
whole process of cascading down. So I think having, especially maybe we don't have to have a set amount, but certainly having money available that when people get into trouble, we can help our community members stay in their homes.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I wasn't aware of this, but Eric told me that the town already sort of has this emergency assistance program. It's sort of like, I don't know, I guess it's not widely publicized, but they've helped people out before with like back taxes and stuff like that. So I wasn't aware of that. So it's good that there's precedent for that, and it's likely that the select board would support that, I think, given that it already exists.
Yeah.
And I think it's really great to have a resource like that in your community because it's something that people will know to go to. Like they probably feel more comfortable going to the town or
Yeah.
people they know as opposed to the big, state program or, some other form of assistance that has a much higher barrier. And I think that can also help you, if you keep it low barrier and keep it available, it can also be a great way to bring folks who are in need and may need other types of assistance or additional assistance to get them plugged into those other programs more easily and without that barrier.
Yep.
Other comments?
I have a question though. Melinda, when you were saying about like that $10,000 that people could use it as a resort, right? If they are not able to get funded from all the other stuff, will it be though, let's say if they need to pay a deposit of, let's say $50,000 and they manage to secure 40,000 from all the other places and we go chip in another 10,000 on top of it, or since they already got 40,000 from somewhere else, they are not eligible anymore? I mean, if our intention is to help them in any way,
yeah, yeah,
then it should be all the way until whatever amount that they require.
yeah. And I
Or
think that
what is the language says?
I think that was my, it was sort of my intention. And I don't know about the, I don't know about the $10,000 limit. But yeah, like I think if they weren't able to get, I mean, and you might even consider like not having it as a last option, like Scott said, just offer it, as a program, regardless of whether they're seeking other funding from other agencies. Like you can just sort of, ignore that part and just,
Yeah, but
just
we need to give some maximum though, right? It cannot be they need 40,000 and they get 60,000 from everybody else. Then that doesn't make sense, also, right?
yeah,
So
right.
there need to be some kind of limitation. And if it is, we are going to chip in up to 10,000, and 10,000 is you get it and free to go, right? We shouldn't be
Mm,
tracking that 10,000 to
yeah,
next 15 years.
yeah,
Amount
got it.
of energy and effort that you require to track it also will be a problem, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
it is going to limit some amount, and that's
yeah, makes sense.
Other comments? I have a question, Darren. Is this your last time with us? Is your time over with this meeting?
Not exactly. This is the end of the fiscal year. I was planning to join for your July meeting since I have a few more hours to spend, and I'm going to spend that this month reviewing the draft housing section of the town plan and giving you any comments. And I can be at the July meeting to talk about that, which I believe is when you're set to talk about that topic already. Is that right, Melinda?
I'm
Or
not
no?
sure. I'm not sure yet.
You already talked about that last month, right? When I wasn't there.
A little bit, but that was sort of, I hadn't really written the draft yet, so we can figure that out, I think.
Yeah. So I am available, and I will be working on the review of the housing section of the plan, regardless of whether I'm at your next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciated all the help that you've been giving us. I think that the two of you working together have really been moving us along far better than we would have been moving without that sort of guidance. At this point, after this review of this document, I'm feeling like we're really starting to get towards something which I appreciate very much. Where do we go with this document? Do we have another discussion of it next month, or you send out a new copy with the changes that you have, and then we have to go to the select board and say we think this is what you want?
Yeah, so I think I will definitely work on another draft with Darren's input, and I think yeah, I mean we could do another iteration. You could discuss it and incorporating the changes that you've suggested tonight. The ordinance, I'm just gonna again, like create a separate policy, from scratch a separate policy with the content from the Article 7 and 8 from the draft Article 7 and 8, which will and just leave the ordinance alone and just create a policy. And then, so I can either at next month's meeting or the following months, I can present the second version of this. It's up to you whether you want to keep plugging away on this. And while you've got momentum, that there's some merit to that.
My inclination, if it does not overload you, would be for us to look next month at both the proposed revisions of the ordinance and the general draft of the policy that would support them. Do other people on the committee agree with that, or am I out in left field somewhere?
So what I'm gonna do, I think just to clarify, I'm sort of scrapping the idea of revising the ordinance. I think the ordinance is just gonna stay the way it is and then the changes that I put in, the substantive changes at the end will be put into a policy instead of changing the ordinance, if that makes sense. Because it'll be just a lot easier to have all that in policy as opposed to changing the ordinance and having it live in the ordinance.
So does the select board then have to approve the policy?
They do, yeah, but it's a different process. They don't have to hold a public hearing for it, et cetera. It's a little bit easier, and more streamlined process for approving that.
Okay, but do you think that you can have a draft for us for the August meeting?
For the August meeting, yeah, definitely. Yep.
Oh, this is only June.
It's
Okay,
June, yeah.
I've lost track of time here.
I may be able to for the July meeting, but I'm not exactly sure about that. I'll try.
It would be helpful to me if you could have it out several days before the meeting. I
Yeah.
spent the afternoon reviewing what you'd sent out this
sorry.
time because
Yeah.
I didn't read far enough in advance. Is there
Okay.
anything else on this now proposed policy for discussion, or should we move on to the petition from the planning commission?
Yeah, there's nothing that I have further about this. So if you want to move on, that's fine. I can share my screen. Oh,
Before you do, I won't join you for this next part of the discussion, but I will say I'm also happy to be available if you end up talking about the Housing Trust Fund policy in August. And just, even though the contract with CCRPC ends and my time is no longer under this program, we still have our regular technical assistance, and I would be more than happy to be able to make sure this keeps moving if you need that help. So no, don't be afraid to ask, and you know where to find us. And Melinda, let me know where you're at with timing on that.
great. Thanks, Darren. Thanks so much.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Darren.
Yeah.
And thanks for your kind words, Charlie. I'm glad to know this was helpful and that we have set you on a good path.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
And Melinda did a lot of work, so I can't take much credit.
You did a lot of work too, so. Alrighty. So let me see, let me turn now to the petition. All right. So to give you a little bit of background, this petition was first presented to the Planning Commission. And the petition basically requests that the town adopt amendments to the bylaws or adopt an ordinance that all new large-scale housing builds must use no fuels that emit greenhouse gases, including fossil fuels, renewable natural gas, biomass, or green hydrogen as their primary source for heating and cooling. And also that all new large-scale housing builds should meet stronger energy conservation building standards. And then the reasoning is just the new homes are going to be in service for more than 100 years, and adding more homes that consume fossil fuels will be short-sighted and expensive to correct. And then they say they'd also like to apply this to commercial construction, but they are not sure how to, how that would happen. They would like these changes to be made as soon as possible in advance of the town plan. And this, I mean, essentially this petition came from Sustainable Williston, which is an organization in town, plus additional residents of Williston. Excuse me a moment, I'm going to shut the window because I don't know if you can hear a lawnmower behind, in the background, but it's bothering me. So all right, maybe that's a little bit better. And then I also wrote a memo to the Housing Committee, basically summarizing the petition, summarizing the petition and giving you a little bit of background. The Energy Committee, the Planning Commission ended up asking the Energy Committee to review and discuss this petition. The Energy Committee had a discussion May 22nd and decided that they do support the idea of this clean heat standard and stronger energy conservation building standards. And they would like to move forward on developing the framework for these regulations. And just, sort of giving you a little bit finer detail, this type of like clean heat standard really needs to be in the form of an ordinance and not bylaws, because the town doesn't have the authority under state statute to require a certain type of heating system under its bylaws. So it would have to be done through an ordinance. And there is some support in the town energy plan for such measures, basically adopting a Vermont building stretch code, energy stretch code, as the standard for all development, and exploring a requirement that all new development provide cold climate heat pumps, or other devices using renewable energy sources as the primary source of heat and hot water. And so the Energy Committee is going to go to the select board with their proposal for moving forward on these regulations. The town manager really wanted to hear from the Housing Committee before the select board considers the Energy Committee's proposal. And so basically, the petition is requesting that the town regulate the way new homes are heated and cooled, and prohibit fossil fuel heating sources. The stronger energy conservation standards, yes, that is in there. To me, it doesn't really impact affordable housing in the way that the clean heat standard does, because affordable homes, at least those that are subsidized, and those that are built by nonprofit affordable housing agencies, are already subject to really strict energy standards. So they would already, meet the energy stretch code. The clean heat standard, there's potentially an impact on the cost of homes, by any new regulation that restricts choices and flexibility, may result in increased costs to build housing. There are incentives available out there through rebates and tax credits, but they probably don't fully compensate for the incremental cost to install heat pumps. So basically, potential cost increases are going to be absorbed by home buyers, in all likelihood will be absorbed by home buyers. And so, there's the chance that putting these requirements in place could result in more expensive homes. It's not like a must, it's not necessarily a given, but it could.
I would think it would be a given. You're putting in something that you're saying will only provide 85% of your heat needs is essentially saying every home needs to have 2 heating systems.
Well, I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I mean, I think that heat pumps it can now like operate without backup heat. But it's the at least 85%. So, if somebody wants to have a backup heating system, they can, but they're not required to have a backup, to have that other 15% be a different heating source.
So are you asking for our support of this or just a general discussion, or what's our?
Yeah, so the town manager wants the housing committee's feedback into this. Not asking for support. I want to hear your thoughts and or if you have concerns, or if you support it, sure. But if you have concerns, just what your thoughts are and what you would say, like I think what the town manager is looking for is some kind of memo from the housing committee on what your thoughts are about these proposed regulations.
Well, I will jump in with a couple of observations. I mean, first of all, as I mentioned before, I'm on the DRB, and once a year we go through growth management, which is when the developers come in and they're scored, based on different criteria. And we recently changed the criteria around this, and none of them even looked at it. They didn't take a bite. No one had ever invoked these points before. They all got 0 on, out of their total points. We changed the rules, and this year everyone got 0 again. So I actually asked in that context, why didn't you look at this and try to get points regarding that? I mean, I'll go into the whole growth management thing. It's a big story, but long story short is they have to come and get a certain amount of points to get part of the allotment. So there's different ways to get points, and none of those developers touched that. I mean, they said they hadn't reviewed them. And so I think before we have these kinds of discussions, we need to understand how the builders are looking at this. I mean, we have a severe housing shortage, and my only conversation with the big builders was just dead on arrival. So I would need to understand that a whole lot more, but what those costs are. And my experience too is like Charlie's, that the cost is significantly more. So I would need to understand that. But secondly, I would say that Williston's very unique. And when I think about our carbon footprint, I think about our 7,000 commuters. I think about our retail workers that can't live in town and have to drive here from like 45 minutes away. So, if we could incentivize things so that they can live closer and maybe even live carless, is that a bigger carbon footprint improvement over these bigger houses that have a different heating unit? So I guess I'm not convinced that that's the best effort that the town can make to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
This is Scott, if I may. I'm very generally supportive of moving off of fossil fuels. I think we have to. The world is burning up, and I think we're in a lot more trouble than maybe even people realize. I do know for a fact that requiring full electrification is going to make things more expensive. It will. And I've heard that from developers, not only here, but in other places as well that have tried to move towards that. There are certain, I like the fact that there is an opportunity to apply for a variance. I know Habitat has done that for a house in Burlington, and it was granted. And in certain cases, that does make that house pencil out so that we can do that. So if there's opportunities in certain cases to say for, especially for a home that's going to be perpetually affordable, where if we say this project just doesn't pencil out unless we go sort of the old fashioned way and do it.
Mhm.
That's something to consider as well. But we don't have much of a future if we don't start thinking about different ways of doing things. And but I'm generally supportive of this with the option of for affordable housing to have an option where somebody can use a fossil fuel if they need to.
Yeah, just following up on that, the Burlington and South Burlington ordinances that are in place right now, and I didn't tell you this, but they're the only two municipalities in Vermont that have adopted like a clean heat ordinance. And theirs does have a provision that if it's financially not feasible, they can get a waiver. So, that could be one option.
Other comments?
I would definitely agree with, we want to encourage affordable housing, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with the trust fund. So kind of I definitely agree that we need to do something about the environment, but it's sort of which one is going to get us there better. It's hard to say. Seems like there's a lot of factors that could be weighed, and mitigating through some allowing a variance sounds reasonable. Would we include variance for a developer?
Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Monica?
I'm curious if the town has information on the different heating options that are currently being used, like the breakdown of what we're seeing currently being used, and kind of, the impact of the existing heating methods versus kind of the limitations this imposes, without the variance being in the picture. I guess I'm just curious if the impact will be more on the sustainability in terms of the environmental aspects, or if it's going to harm the sustainability of perpetually affordable or any affordable housing. I guess I'm kind of curious so this is focusing on new buildings, but with, the existing buildings, I guess I'm just trying to wonder, like, going forward, obviously the idea would be great in theory to require the heat pumps, but if it's also just outnumbered by how much fossil fuel sucking heat is already in place, considering that we're so thirsty for new housing options, I'm just wondering the old housing options effects on that.
So I think we can get a breakdown of what sort of the current heating systems are in town, and the percentage of housing units that have certain types of heat. And I'm happy to do that. As far as new construction goes, I would say that pretty much all of it is going to be natural gas, and not like putting in oil systems or kerosene heating or anything like that, or electric resistance heat. It's going to be pretty much exclusively natural gas and heat pumps for those developers who, who are putting in heat pumps. And there's not, I mean, I don't know, some are, but, and certainly, I mean, some are thinking of in the developments that have already been permitted in Williston. So I think that developers are sort of moving in that direction, but it is still more expensive. And natural gas, the price of natural gas it's not as volatile as other fossil fuels like oil and kerosene. It's not as like sort of more stable as electricity. I mean, electricity is going to go up, like everything. Price of natural gas, is going to go up. But it's really hard to determine, like, whether at some point natural gas will become more expensive than electricity. Right now, it's actually the cheapest in terms of operating costs. It's cheaper to run natural gas than it is to run electric heat pump. So that's also something, I don't know, that you might want to consider. But yeah, as far as new construction, it's going to be either natural gas or heat pumps. I think. I mean, maybe that's an oversimplification, but to the best of my knowledge, that's kind of the way, way things are going.
Is the town ever,
What part of the town has natural gas available?
What part of the town? I would say most of the town has, maybe not, certainly like north of I-89. It's pretty much available everywhere at this point. And south of I-89, I'm not sure exactly where it's got, but again, you're not going to see a lot of big developments. You're not going to probably see any big developments south of I-89. So
have we ever required any solar or considered requiring?
We haven't required solar. That is an area, again, where it gets a little bit shaky for the town to require it, because it's municipalities don't regulate solar. The Public Utility Commission does, and it's really out of the purview of municipality to regulate it. It's one of those exempted types of development. The city of South Burlington they do have a provision in their zoning regulations. I believe it's in their zoning that they require solar, but the way they get around that, the there's the lack of statutory authority, is to not require that solar to be connected to the grid. So, it seems, I don't know, to me, it's a little bit on shaky legal ground, and it would be, vulnerable to an appeal, to a lawsuit. I don't know.
So I would say, responding to this, we clearly don't have the data, the information that we need. How much does it add to housing costs? What do developers think? So I don't think we can do anything with this right now. This is very squishy.
Anyone else?
What?
Anyone else want to comment on this?
It might be, it might be out of my turn, but let me say something. While this was discussed in planning commission, we were also talking about this cost and so-called benefit analysis. Melinda, seems like no one really go there and do that such things, or that information wasn't available.
Yeah, I mean,
Or is it too obvious that you shouldn't have to do anything?
well, I mean, I think without getting too granular, I mean, I think it's kind of a given that the requirement will add some cost. You know, otherwise, if it was cheaper to do it this way, everybody would be doing it, right?
I hear you. It makes sense.
You know, uh, how much cost? I don't know. That's hard to say. And I don't know if it makes sense for staff or the committee to go try and dig out that information, because any two developers will tell you two different things, you know, about how much it costs. I mean, you know, there's
Or could we ask the people, the petitioning, to say, do you guys have such information? Because they are the one asking it. I'm pretty sure they should have done some study, right?
yeah,
So put it this way, right? We have almost zero EV 10 years ago. Now we have EV everywhere. Why? Because there's some long-term benefits, right?
mm,
Same thing, there must be some break-even point on this particular thing. If there's no break-even point, why are we even talking about it, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing to look at would be the Vermont Energy Action Network does this annual report every year, and they have run some statistics on sort of life cycle costs of heating systems, which, you know, I can certainly send you a link to their report and you can kind of look at that as a starting point. But, you know, I think that the argument can be made that the life cycle cost of heat pumps, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say, like, is it on par with like a natural gas boiler? You know, it's still probably cheaper to run natural gas, but then if you consider the carbon emissions and the cost of carbon emissions, then that could tip the scales, certainly. So
South Burlington has done a lot of development recently.
yeah,
Is that being required? Was that within the clean heat ordinance? Because there is that O'Brien development that went with all
right. And
natural.
yeah, and the O'Brien development, I mean, they're saying that you know, it was possible for them to and then what Marla's referring to is a development that is like net zero, and it's got like all the homes have heat pumps and all the homes have solar, and they're super well insulated, and they said that it was no more expensive to build those homes than it is to build other homes. I don't know. I mean, I think it depends. Like, again, you can get different answers if you talk to different people. And I mean, even if it's not a given that it's going to be more expensive, like maybe it's not a given, it's a possibility. What if it's just a possibility, but not necessarily a given? I don't know.
Anyone else have any comments on it? Melinda, do you have a sense of what to report back from this committee?
Not really. You don't have to report back immediately. I mean, I can do a little bit more sort of looking into this. It seems like you want more facts about like how this really impacts the cost of housing.
Oh,
Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, we're getting,
okay.
if it
Well, I would-
results in less housing building being built, then that's
Yeah.
counter to our charter.
Yeah,
When I looked at adding a heat pump to my house, the salesman kept saying how much I would save on air conditioning, and I don't have an air conditioner, so that I didn't have any of those savings. So it didn't work for me well at all. I couldn't see any economic basis for putting in a heat pump, but I did put in a heat pump water heater. So
yeah. Well, it's right. The air conditioning factor that could really, that makes a big difference because especially now with the climate getting warmer and, more homes really it becoming a necessity almost, the air conditioning, depending on where you live, like, but when you factor in air conditioning, yeah, it's running a heat pump for air conditioning is way cheaper than running a traditional air conditioner. So, well, anyway,
okay, if we don't have any more discussion on this, the other business included picking your chair and vice chair beginning with our next meeting. And I know I just got a flash that I'd gotten an email saying congratulations on being reappointed to the committee. I assume most of you have gotten that. So can you stop screen sharing so we can see everyone?
yeah,
Okay, so I am not committed to being chairman. It's been a nice year, and I've enjoyed working with Melinda on doing planning. But I don't think that you need to feel any particular reason for re-electing me as chairman. I'm willing to do it again, but I'm not driven to do it.
Are we supposed to be deciding this today?
it would be great, because next meeting is July and that's the start of the fiscal year. And again, like it's not a must that you have to switch things up, but as a general rule, committees do these sort of appointments at the end of the fiscal year.
Have we heard from Debbie and her intents?
No.
Well, I mean, I think both Debbie and Charlie run a good meeting, so I'd love to have them both.
Fine with me. Unless somebody else is interested in.
Sounds good to me as well.
You okay with that, Charlie?
Oh, yeah, I'm okay with that. And Wednesday nights become difficult for me during the summer because I play in the town band, and when we have concert nights, I'll have to miss the meeting. I was willing to miss a rehearsal tonight, but winter time it works fine. Summertime gets to be a problem.
Huh. So is that every Wednesday, Charlie, that you?
Yeah, there's either a rehearsal or a concert.
Yeah.
Every Wednesday from starting today and going almost to the end of August. So it only affects 2 meetings, July and August.
Okay. And as far as this, like for everyone, obviously Debbie's not here, but does this day and time work for folks? Do you want to? I know, Monica, you said you work until 6. Is that right? And
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and would it be,
But really, there's no better day because
Let's-
they're all kind of either 6 or longer. So
what's that? I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
sorry, I have a bad internet. Wednesday's fine with me. Every other day is more or less the same. So I really am. Yeah, if Wednesday works, yeah, that's fine.
And what about time wise? Does 6 work or should we move to 6:30? What do folks think?
I would prefer 6:30. I get rushed getting supper on the table. I'm always glad to get out before dishes come up. But
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds good.
6:30 is fine.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we can change, we can make that change if that works for everybody. Yeah.
And Melinda, wasn't our July meeting moved anyway? Or do I have that confused?
Yeah, because the first Wednesday in July is like the day before 4th of July. So, you know, everybody's gonna be watching fireworks and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, we could cancel, or we could, I mean, I moved it to July 17th, which is the 3rd Wednesday, and if that works for everybody, we can do that. If not,
or we could just go right on to August.
or you could just go right on to August. It's your
Yeah.
it's your choice what you want.
July 3rd, everybody will be at the bandstand listening to the
Yes.
4th of July concert and sharing in the ice cream.
Cheering for Charlie, yes.
Yeah, right. Right.
17th is fine for July for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
at
Okay.
6:30.
Yeah, and then lastly, I would ask just if you could please just let me know a couple of days before the meeting whether you're going to attend or not, because we have had quorum issues in the past, and it seems like we shouldn't even hold a meeting if we don't have a quorum. We shouldn't hold a meeting. So it just helps with scheduling and so forth. If I know ahead of time if folks are going to come, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
And next meeting, we'll be hearing from Champlain Housing Trust and trying to figure out how we can cooperate with them. If anyone has anything else that you would like to have on the agenda, why send a note to Melinda and let her know. And she's been very good about talking to me about all this. So she actually does all of the work.
No.
This is true.
Is there anything else that we need to do tonight?
I do not think so. Let me just do a quick check. Hold on. Oh, I mean, I don't think so. I just had ideas brainstorming for FY25 work plan, but if anybody, you know, I mean, I think that you're working on the policy, and now probably working on a memo regarding the clean heat standard, and those are the sort of the more immediate things. But if you have ideas for other things that you want to accomplish in FY25, maybe you can just send them to me and we can discuss.
Right, and we have the report coming, right, from,
Oh yeah, annual report. Thank you. Yes, so that should probably be on either July or August agenda, just kind of working on an annual report. It'll be pretty brief because you didn't start up until November last year. So what I'll do is, you know, I can just do a rough draft, and then, you know, we can work on it.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah.
So does anyone have anything else that they would like to do tonight? in the absence of any further business, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here for what I think was a very productive meeting.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye
great
now.
evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.